Hello, my name is Bill Bowen, and I'm a project management instructor here in Ottawa, Canada. And in today's video, we're going to compare and contrast the purpose of the budgeting section in the project charter versus that of the project plan. For anyone who is developing either a project charter or a project plan as part of an academic assignment, or just wishes to know more about budgets in general, this video should be helpful. It may initially appear unclear as to why a budget section is needed in both the project plan and the project charter document. The reason is that the information contained in these different budget sections serves different purposes. As we will see in this video, the project charter budget defines the spending framework for the project, while the project plan budget actually allocates funds to specific WBS items or individual deliverables, tasks, and activities. Let's begin by first looking at the project charter budget section. A project charter is produced very early on in the project's life cycle. It is produced before a project has been planned out. So at this point, the project's deliverables, tasks, and activities have not been formally identified. As such, a project charter budget focuses on identifying what funds have been allocated to the project, and in some cases, providing an indication of the project's priorities by specifying when and under what conditions the funds can be spent. The project charter budget can apply additional budgetary constraints onto the project by means such as identifying pre-existing supply arrangements that the project must adhere to, or sometimes it can even identify preferred vendors or suppliers that the project must use. So the overall purpose of a project charter budget is not to allocate funds as we will see being done within the project plan, but instead to define a spending framework for the project. So let's look at a few examples of what a project charter budget might look like. For our first example, let us assume that we are part of a matrix-structured organization and that we are on a research and development project. We're looking to create something new. Our organization might use the project charter to specify the budgetary constraints that have been placed on the project. For example, they may specify that funds can be spent on specific departments, for example, research, development, manufacturing, engineering, or support. In doing so, the organization defines the budgetary priorities for the project and how they want the money spent, without intruding on the project manager's job of allocating funds to specific tasks. Let's develop our example further and examine a more typical representation of a project charter's budget along with its funding constraints. As we see here, funds have been allocated to the organization's internal departments, meaning that in fulfilling the project manager can utilize specific services within the organizations from the various departments. Furthermore, as shown, the project charter budget also has funds available for purchasing goods and services from outside the organization. As we can see, this type of high-level budget does not go into details in defining how the project funds should be spent. Instead, it simply defines a budget framework or the constraints that have been placed on the budget. For various reasons, including that of simplicity, organizations do not always provide monetary values when specifying how much support the project can utilize from the various internal departments. Sometimes they simply list the level of effort or the number of days of support that will be available to the project from the different departments. As project manager, when you accept a project charter, it is very important to fully understand the implications of the budget framework. While overall, lots of funds and supports might be available to your project, if it has not been allocated properly within the correct categories, this can be problematic. Do not assume you can simply shift funds between categories. For example, you might find it less expensive and more intuitive to take money out of your research and development budget and put it into your goods and material budget so that you can simply purchase the off-the-shelf products that you need, rather than attempting to develop them in-house. However, the organization may not allow you to do this, as they might feel there are strategic advantages to finding different applications for their product and developing new in-house skills. There may also be other less obvious reasons, such as your research and development efforts might allow them to apply for special tax credits, and therefore they do not wish you to shift funds out of this category. Even attempting to reallocate the level of effort within the various departments of an organization may not be allowed, as other departments may not have capacity to spare. Thus, having accepted a project charter budget framework, you may find yourself stuck with it and unable to change the budget allocations. That was one example of how a project charter budget framework might look. There are lots of other ways to approach a high-level budget. Let's look at one more. Supposing you were on a project to build someone's dream home. What might a project charter budget for a dream home look like? In the case of a dream home, a project sponsor or client may have allocated their funds in a completely different manner. For example, they may have allocated money towards the purchase of land, landscaping, home construction, and the major components found within a home. In doing so, they have set their priorities for the project, without actually allocating funds to one particular task or another. This would be a more typical representation of a dream home's high-level budget. The challenge ahead for the project manager is to take these budget constraints and figure out what mix of labor and materials would be needed to meet the dream home requirements. Well, we've now seen two examples of high-level budget. Clearly, there would be lots of ways to define a budget framework, depending on the particular nature of the project and the objective of the high-level budget. You need to keep in mind the purpose of the high-level budget, and that is to pass information on to the project manager on the budgetary constraints, framework, and priority. How best to do this will depend on the project itself. Now let's look at a more detailed budget. These are the type that we more naturally think about when we're thinking about budgeting. These are the budgets that we would find within our project plan. The PMBOK defines these budgets as the ones that allocate project funds to actual WBS activities or components. As project managers, when preparing our detailed project plan budget, we need to focus on allocating funds to specific WBS activities. And this not only includes the funds needed to do the actual work itself, but also the funds needed for the project's supporting activities such as risk management, quality management, and general project management. Remember, if these supporting activities are not funded, then they're not going to happen on the project. Here's an example of what a simple project plan budget might look like. As you can see, funds have been allocated to cover the cost of labor and material for each WBS item. Furthermore, we've added additional funds to cover the cost of our supporting activities. On this particular project, these supporting activities would include risk, quality, and stakeholder management. With this example budget, only a summary of the supporting plan costs have been included within the main budget itself. A more detailed breakdown of costs for each of the supporting plans could then be found within the supporting plan itself. For example, if the reader wanted to know more about how the costs for risk management were being allocated, these cost breakdowns would be included within the risk management plan itself. And that completes my high-level introduction into budgets. Hopefully I provided you with enough detail so that you can successfully differentiate between the purpose of a project charter budget and a project plan budget. I encourage you to review the course material and the PMBOK content for further information on these topics. Once again, I'm Bill Bowen, and if you're a student of mine, I look forward to providing you feedback on your upcoming assignments. If not, I hope you found this video useful. If you liked the video, feel free to check out other project management related videos that I've produced on my channel.